Being hailed as a hero, Captain Chesley B. Sullenberger III needed all of his 40 years of flying experience when he had to crash land his US Airways Airbus into New York's Hudson River. His skill managed to save the lives of all 155 people on board. The flight was bound for North Carolina, but barely had it taken off, then it ran into trouble. Captain Sullenberger's plane may have suffered engine failure after it flew through a flock of geese. From New York, here's Greg Wood.
It's being called the Miracle on the Hudson, an Airbus A320 jet with 155 passengers and crew on board, bound for Charlotte in North Carolina, forced to ditch in the river just next to the skyscrapers of Midtown Manhattan. The temperature was freezing and the current running rapidly. Eyewitnesses described the scene.
I just saw the big splash when the plane just bounced over the water, like they landed it on the water.
Looked over the water and we thought we had a chance because, you know, there was some water, and got to give it to the pilot, man. He made a hell of a landing.
Flight 1549 took off from LaGuardia Airport at 15:26 local time. An Air Controllers Union spokesman said the pilot reported a double bird strike less than a minute later. The pilot tried to return to land, but was forced to ditch the plane in the Hudson River. Emergency services were called at 15:31. The passengers were already climbing out when they arrived.
The pilot did a masterful job of landing the plane in the river and then making sure that everybody got out. I had a long conversation with the pilot. He walked the plane twice after everybody else was off and tried to verify that there was nobody else on board and assures us there were not. I also talked to a passenger who said he was the last one up the aisle and that he made sure there was nobody behind him.
All passengers and crew survived, taken off by ferry boats which arrived within minutes of the crash. One victim suffered 2 broken legs, and paramedics treated 78 patients, most for minor injuries. They were badly shaken, but alive.
For a second, I just thought that I was going to die right there in a plane, you know. I was just going to drown to death.
I followed the stricken aircraft for more than an hour as it drifted rapidly downstream on the icy current of the Hudson River here behind me. First with people nervously clustered on the wings, waiting to be taken off by ferries, and then largely submerged, eventually guided to a halt by tugs. Air accident investigators have now arrived here in New York, but there's no disputing the cool-headedness of the pilot, who managed to avert disaster by bringing his plane down in the river, even though both its engines had failed.
There's been a lot of speculation as to the cause of this accident already. However, the NTSB investigation is just beginning. We'll be looking into all aspects of the accident, including airplane structures, systems, power plants, flight crew operations, survival factors, air traffic control, and airplane performance.
Greg Wood, BBC News, New York.
Well, we've had lots of images sent in by BBC World News viewers of that plane crash landing. This picture was sent in by Nigel shortly after the plane went down. It was taken from a nearby 10th floor apartment. Gregory Lamb snapped this image, also from a nearby building. Paul Barnes-Hoggett's photo here shows the emergency services prompt arrival. And these last couple of images were taken by David Nunn, who took them from Battery Park in Lower Manhattan, where the plane is now tied up. This is the scene now, live pictures from New York at 7:10 in the morning local time there. You can see the plane tied up at Battery Park. The accident investigators are going to be trying to find out exactly what happened. They'll want to have a thorough look at the plane, particularly its black box flight recorders, to work out why those aircraft engines cut out, if that was the cause of the accident. Was it because they flew through a flock of geese? For two engines to go out of action in a bird strike is very rare. And we'll be speaking to our correspondent live at the Hudson. Welcome back to World News Today. Well, it's the great escape as far as the 155 passengers and crew on board a crippled US Airways jet are concerned. They miraculously survived after the jet's captain managed to crash land the plane into New York's Hudson River. It ran into trouble shortly after takeoff. Investigators are now at the scene trying to work out what happened. Well, for more, I'm joined by Darren Audette, a pilot and expert in flight safety. Darren, you fly this same plane, the Airbus. How difficult is it to bring it down in water?
It's quite an achievement, Jonathan. An awful lot goes on the flight deck, particularly if that sort of failure happens shortly after takeoff. Very limited time to react to the emergency, comprehend it, and react appropriately. To give you an idea of what it's like on the flight deck, There'll be a cavalry charge sound initially. It'll all go dark. The screens will come off and then come on again. It will all take time. There'll be clanging and bells and whistles. Relays will be made and broken as generators are reset. So it's a very, very busy time, very distracting. And what the pilot must do in those few seconds, bearing in mind that he's not a great deal above his stalling speed, maybe just 20% if it's shortly after takeoff, is that he must keep that speed, maintain a safe margin above his stalling speed in an aircraft that's now a very different aircraft to what he had a few minutes ago, because
it's a glider now, presumably. It's got no power of its own.
It's a glider, correct, and the flight control laws have degraded, so he is now flying a more or less conventional aircraft from the very safe aircraft that he had a few moments ago that protected him against the stall. He's now not got that protection. And additionally, what's particularly to his credit is that with reduced control in pitch, he's clearly managed to achieve a correct pitch attitude with this lower level of control.
That must be very difficult, because in the past I know people have told me that when you try to land a plane on water, it's like hitting concrete if you get it wrong.
It could be if the nose went in first or if the wing went in first. So he's managed to clearly keep the wings level. It followed the. It looks at this stage as if he's followed the Airbus recommendations. In the tail will actually touch first with 11 degrees of pitch, and the aircraft is clearly settled on the water somehow. Some aircraft might skip, as has happened in previous ditchings, and it might take a couple of skips before settling. That might break the aircraft up, but miraculously, in this instance, the aircraft has managed to stay intact, or as it appears from the pictures.
Is there an element of luck in this? Was he a lucky pilot?
I think, left to its own devices, the aircraft could quite easily have gone out of control. So I think a lot comes down to his skill, and he's clearly kept a cool head. In the industry, we have the buzzwords aviate, navigate, and communicate. And the essence of aviate is to keep flying the aeroplane. And he's managed, despite all of this going on around him, to maintain control of the aircraft all the way down onto the water. And by some recent information that's come up, he's actually, he saw the emergency all the way through by checking that everybody had evacuated the aircraft before he himself got out.
Would he have practiced this? I mean, obviously not practiced in real terms, but actually they'd have practiced scenarios as to what to do in this circumstance.
Well, there's guidance given by Airbus, but there are so many possible scenarios that we don't get a chance to practice everything, because this is one of the less likely scenarios to happen. There's other scenarios that are more likely, so we tend to practice those in the simulator. When an airline pilot does his 6 monthly checks, he's more likely to get one of the standard emergencies. So again, that's more credit to the captain in this instance.
All right, Darren, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Well, you can get more on just how a flock of birds can bring a plane down, because that's what it looks like at the moment. All the rest of your pictures from the scene, then, of course, you can go to our news website at the address. You can see it now, bbc.com/news.